Hey now, welcome to the show, where the wind's blowing strong and the truth can flow. This is the good oil. Catch a vibe today with Cam Slater leading us all the way.
Brian Tamaki, welcome to the Good Oil podcast.
Thank you, Cam. Great to be here.
Tell us about the life of Brian.
The life of Brian, how did I get started?
Yeah.
In life, I got born.
Yeah, okay. You're being the joker now, but you're showing me the Brian Tamaki that I like, the one that I met, when you came to our rescue with Avi Yemeni for his tour.
Avi, yeah.
And you stepped up, your blokes stepped up, gave us a couple of venues. But, there's this caricature of Brian Tamaki that the New Zealand media likes to portray. And that's not the Brian Tamaki that I know and that I've seen in quite private moments. And that's what I want, to hear about. How did you get started in life? What did you do? And how did you then have this revelation that you needed to start a church?
Oh, I was like every other Kiwi kid growing up in the 70s mainly. Obviously a little bit of the 60s, but the 70s was my time. And that was a great New Zealand to live in. We were free. We could say what we wanted and do what we want, with goodness, not the stuff we see today. So, I had my early years on the farm in Te Awamutu, and I grew up with of course, my father's Māori and my mother is European. So the best of both worlds, the Māori world and the Kiwi or the European world. I grew up in both, and they were both very happy. They had great contributions to my character, my life. I had my eyes set on sports like most people, rugby. Played rugby league in those days. You could play, that's how free we could play Saturday rugby union.
Yeah.
League on Sunday. I'm a musician. I was playing in a band. On the farm, I was loving life until I was 21. And without too much going into the depth of things, I was radically converted to Christianity by meeting Christ with an out-of-body experience. Had to be, for me to be convinced about religion. So my world changed and went on a different path.
Tell us about that out-of-body experience.
The out-of-body experience, well, my mum was a Methodist kind of, most of the settlers came out Presbyterian, Anglican, or Methodist. My mum was a Methodist. The only one in the family of 6, by the way. Very, very European, middle-class farming community in the Waikato. The rest of her family weren't religious. Only mum had that faith, and I still can't figure it out today why she did, until I became a Christian and then experienced the Christian life, and I realized my mother was like that, so I could have some type of Sunday school upbringing. Me and my 2 mischievous brothers, a year apart, Mike and Doug. I was the eldest, and we were peas in a pod.
Couldn't separate the three of you.
Couldn't separate the 3 of us. No, what is it? 12 months apart, and poor mum used to walk us to church as little kids in Te Awamutu. And Dad was somewhere partying all weekend, didn't turn up. But mum was a churchgoer, and she went out of her way. It was a hell of a job for her. 3 little pesky kids bent on mischief all the way there. It was a long walk to get to the church. Hats, typical middle-class European congregation. My mum had these 3 little half-breeds, half-breed Indians. We were like that, Māoris, and gosh, we played up at that church for her. We would niggle, we would fight, we would push each other, would take the money out of the plate as it goes past, and she'd smack one of them and one of my brothers one day, and he pulled his pants down in objection. So this thing was going on, but one of the things I got out of that, Cam, was mum never gave up. She was consistent, committed. And that rubbed off on me, I think. What I put in my hand to, I became a very committed person to it. I saw her devoutness to a religion that I couldn't understand. a God who we couldn't see, or,
Probably didn't even think you could talk to God.
well, no. But she was adamant, and often to the bagging and mocking of her siblings, and even my grandmother and grandfather were atheists in a way. But somehow Mum would pray for us every day before school, and we used to yell out from our bunks. We had little bunks in the room, and my brother were on the bottom, and I made sure I was on the top bunk, so I could drop things down or do other little sneaky things, But we'd always cry out, come and say our prayers, Mum.
Yeah.
I think it was just a kind of getting Mum in there because Dad wasn't around, and she would religiously say our prayers. But those are things that rub off on me, but I never knew God in that. I just saw how devout my mum was to the nebulous, invisible God.
It's funny, isn't it, the impact that mothers can have?
Yeah.
Because my mother was very religious. She was brought up a Presbyterian.
Yeah.
And she, I was very credulous as a child. I did naughty things in church. My mum had this wicked pinch, though. She'd sort of just reach across under her arm and pinch me in the side or behind the legs and give me a pinch to sort me out if I was causing trouble.
Mm.
But she actually went and studied a lot about religion. She studied them all, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism. She went to university to do that.
Mm.
And I used to have great discussions with her, but I couldn't quite see what she was on about. She was a Christian and prayed all the time and did the same sort of things that your mother did. But it wasn't, I was a lot slower on the uptake than you were.
Well, I probably was like you too. It didn't. I was just thinking while we're talking here, how many people now in your audience listening to this actually had parents like that. If you're our age or my age, I'm not quite sure what your age is, but,
I'm 56.
Well, I'm 67.
Right.
So growing up with, why we're revealing our ages, go back a generation or two. And I think most Kiwis were religious or had a Presbyterian or Anglican
faith,
Catholic, brought up in Christianity.
Yeah.
And Christianity was accepted as our faith, our religion of this country. I believe that's correct. When the early missionaries who came out were Christians at the signing of the treaty. So I think New Zealand, we could safely say we were a Christian country. And those values early in the piece did hold up, I think, some ethics in our lives, being honest generally, not going around, ram raiding or shooting people or
it was almost unheard of that there were murders.
That's right. Well, we all had guns, like on the farm. We had a 303 and a shotgun behind the front door. No licenses, no farmer, because we didn't go around shooting people. We shot rabbits and
it was very rare. I mean, there was the Dean Wycliffe was headlines, because he had shot somebody. And we had the Bassett Road machine gun murders, made headlines. Wouldn't even make a headline.
When this country had Christian values underpinning our democracy, we did well.
Yeah.
Our families thrived. It wasn't perfect, but we, like you say, we at least we had Sunday off, could have Sunday lunch together at the table. Nobody, probably today's generation, wonder what I'm talking about, but we used to gather around Sunday around the table and have the Sunday roast or be together as a family, and we didn't have work. We had a day off where we could strengthen family, talk about each other's lives, what's going on in your world. We were in touch with each other. And I think that and some other values, like just simply praying for the children. I don't know if that goes on today. And boy, do we need prayer in our country again.
Oh, we do. But it's funny, though, because coming in on the ferry this morning, a lady sitting opposite me saw me typing and started asking me a few questions and everything. And somehow we got on to religion. And I had noticed when she asked me the question that she had crucifixes as earrings.
Ooh.
And, you don't wear a crucifix, really, if you don't believe. But she was disparaging about religion, Christianity, and all of that. And it sort of revealed it to me. And she said, I used to be a Catholic. And I said, I meet a lot of people who say that. I used to be a Catholic. But I said, we were talking, I said, the country has lost its faith. We used to go to church on Sunday or Saturday if you're an Adventist. And that would create a fellowship, a community with like-minded people. Sometimes you would meet afterwards for lunch, or often you'd go home after church and have a family roast, or in our case, Dad would make pancakes. So we really look forward to church because it meant we were going to get pancakes for lunch. And we've lost that. People are not getting that. And I said that to her, and she said, oh, religion doesn't mean anything to me. And I said to her, well, that's funny because you're wearing a crucifix in each ear. I said, I wear mine around my neck. You wear yours in your ears. So it isn't lost to you. They're little reminders to you that there's faith in there somewhere. And she sort of like didn't have an answer to that. And I wasn't expecting an answer to that. But then she said to me, oh, thank you, when we got up and got off the ferry.
Well, that's when I think about that way back when you think it's religious and it doesn't have an impact on our adult life, but it does.
It has a huge impact on our adult life.
You know those prayers that Mum was praying with me and my two little brothers, and taking the time to take us to church, which a lot of people did then. And it may not be, they probably didn't know God's voice and the way that we live it now. And but I remember doing something where my first job out of school was a paper boy, delivering papers, and fairly a young fella. And when I was delivering the papers, I found out that in those days that people were getting their milk delivered to the milk bottles. You remember the old milk bottles in the letterbox?
Yeah.
And it first started off, they used to put a little bit of money in there. I think it was 2 cents.
2 cents, 5 cents, yeah, 10-cent pieces.
So I used to put the papers in the letterbox, and the letterbox would rattle. And I pulled it out and thought, gee, now here's what happened. And I looked at it and I thought, heck. So I tipped it out, put the money in my pocket, put the bottle back. I thought, I'll get the other one too and put it back. So I did this for two rounds for 2 nights, invited one of my classmates and said, hey, I can get some money. Where? Come with me. So he came with me too. So I was teaching another guy.
You went to school and you had the most lollies, didn't you?
And we went to the shop. This is what we did, Cam. You were right. I want 1 cent worth of aniseed balls, please. I got 5. Here's the economy, Chris Luxon. I got 5 aniseed balls for 1 cent. So you can imagine the bulging packet. But here's how silly and kind of absent-minded we were. We did it 3 nights in a row, afternoons. And of course, at the last one, a couple of guys got together and thought, our money, because the milkman wouldn't put the milk in there. Grabbed us from behind the hedge and pulled us off our bikes and put us in the car and took us to the police station. And this was my first brush. I'd have some later on, though, for protest, but my first brush with police. Took us in there and we sat there, we were crying, and they were saying, right, who stole the money? We both pointed at each other without looking at each other. And we were crying our eyes out. So the policeman said, I'm going to let you off this time, but don't steal again. At that moment, I learned that lesson. I learned it early that I was not to steal like that. It was something that...
I think we all stole milk money, though. I certainly did.
Yeah, well, milk, but that was free money.
I had a long, like a World War II greatcoat with really deep pockets. So you just get the bottle and upend it, and the coins would all drop out into the pocket, and you put the bottle back and carry on.
Yeah.
But like you, I got caught.
Yeah. Well, I even, like when I was thirsty, pop in the grapefruit one. Oh, yeah, drink you. Then put just think that I'm going to drink the other half.
So you were a rascal, really?
I was a little rascal. But that's what I'm saying is that's the height of my crime. That was the best I could get. I got it. After that, working hard for me was part of life, but never to take from anybody else again. So early lessons like that, really counted. That was part of it.
You probably got a hiding from mum when you got home from.
Well, when I got, that's right. Good for reminding me. When I got home, Mum knew about it, of course. And she asked me about it. And I said, why did you do it? And I said, well, I don't know. It looked like it was free money. And I wanted some lollies because, I had no money. The paper money wasn't much then, what you're getting paid. But she said, well, that's not right doing that, Brian. And, as we asked God to watch over us and be honest, you got to be honest all the time. And I was thinking about what she was saying, that she said, God is always there watching. That's the first time I got an insight that God was this invisible watcher, is watching my life. So maybe these things colluded for when I was going to have my 21st and after I was drunk as a skunk, my 21st.
So you played some rugby on the weekend?
Oh, I was
had your 21st?
Mate, I was on the verge of, I had trialled for the Kiwis, the junior Kiwis at that stage, and the Waikato Juniors. I was a very good rugby player, and my whole goal was to be an All Black. In those days, who didn't have that goal? Who wasn't interested in playing for the best teams in league as well? So I captained teams, and I had that gift of leadership that was recognised. I captained the rugby league team at the same time. I was captain the team from the South Waikato club that we were playing with then. So I was involved deeply with that, and I was playing music. I was in a part of a band. We were playing at some of the clubs, and the football clubs didn't have clubs in those days. It was socials.
The rugby club or the leagues club?
The rugby clubs were the big one that I played with and drank at. So I was doing all that. We were hard workers. We were a farming community, rugby. But things weren't going too well after a while. I think that I felt at that point in time that something was happening with my life. Everything was getting set up, that suddenly I was going to have a big disruption. And meeting Hannah was one of those big disruptions. But that was when I started to sense that I was going to change course in life.
So you had your 21st, you're hammered.
Yeah, I was.
What happened then?
Well, it wasn't long after that my mum, funny that, she was a Methodist for 25, 30 years, superintendent in the Sunday school, and she said that the Methodist minister's wife invited a group of ladies to this Pentecostal meeting.
Oh, yeah.
And this is how her...
Happy hand clappers we used to call.
Yeah, the Happy Clappy Club. I don't know. I knew nothing about it. But she came back and said she got saved. And I said, I thought you were already saved. She said, well, I thought I was, Brian, but I met Jesus and got filled with the Holy Spirit. Now, that was all kind of strange talk to me. But I could not deny that the stark religious mother that I knew for years, that was stoic, just very religious, but there was no kick or life in it, was very noticeable and defined.
Formulaic and defined.
Was defined to the new life she'd found and baptized in the Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit, right? I did say, what was that? And she said, well, I got filled with the Holy Spirit and just changed my life. So I said, oh, good for you, But Dad got converted, my father. Now, he was an alcoholic. He was a violent man. Hit my mum, used to hit us kids. So it was a bit more of a different story when my dad got converted. And then they must have decided to target me. And that's where it started, and they did. They brought it to me one day at home. Look, to cut a long story short, they invited me to a meeting they were having at Turangawaii Marae, of all places.
In Huntley?
Yes, Ngaruahi.
Ngaruahi, yeah. What are you? I don't know why I said Huntley, but...
Well, same. That's where the Queen lived.
Yeah.
But my dad was deeply connected to the royal tribe. My grandmother was a Hirangi, which was Princess Tapuia's name, Tapuia Hirangi.
Yeah.
So I didn't know I was very deeply tied to the Tainui Maniapoto tribe. I wasn't into, like a lot of my Māori friends in the 70s, we weren't interested in the Māori side. Nobody was chasing this whole tikanga getting deep into it. We just integrated with our European brothers and sisters, and we got on really well. So I went to a meeting there at the marae. This was the Māori section of the Apostolic Church of New Zealand, equivalent to the Assemblies of God.
Yep.
But I came along because Dad said there's a big hangi. That's what I went for. So in my Mark II Zephyr, Rothman smokes, Rothman cigarettes.
Yeah.
In the back of my boot, I had some Waikato, Creative Waikato, and also DB. So I was drinking both. And I wasn't an alcoholic or anything, but I did drink with the boys, and we popped some, doing
A rugby playing, band playing, hard man.
Yeah.
With a forestry contract.
Yeah, well, that came after I was farming.
Yeah.
I was running our family farm for a while, and I'd met Hannah. Well, I met Hannah then before that in Tukarua when I started to leave the farm to go to forestry. So I went into the hard-working huhu. Let's call ourselves the huhu gangs because of the huhu grubbers and the But they were bushmen. They weren't your gang like they have today.
They were hard men.
Hard workers.
Yeah.
Hard men. We worked from 6 till 6, dark till dark. Every day, falling trees, loading, tied up strops and bullies and, skidders and cross-cutting, the whole 9 yards. We used to run home in our jack boots and sondries. That's how beastly men we were. We were 10K left for our rugby training.
Yeah.
Hard men.
So you worked hard all day and ran home hard.
Well, we played hard rugby, played hard at night too. Won't go into that part of it. But it was a great life. We lived life hard. We played it hard, but we looked after each other. I love the brotherhood. The commonality of friendship was really strong. And I think everything contributed to the type of character I was. They're a very soft part of me, if I can say that, and always very compassionate for the underdog and for the person that didn't have anything. I was just a natural giver. I'd give away too much, Hannah said sometimes, and money. I'd help people who were not getting by, or I saw somebody struggling in the supermarket. I'd go and pay for their groceries. This is before I was a Christian. And I'd always have a competitive side to me. Very competitive. I hated losing in a rugby team and often would plan.
But no one likes losing, right?
No, but not to the point I was going to. Scheming in the last 10 minutes on how to take a game out. How to target certain areas and players and get the win. I didn't want to lose on the farm in butterfat production. I would get the best going for our dairy herds. I would. Feeding, going out in all weathers, looking after the cows so they produce. We had a Jersey herd then, so the butterfat was very important to us. Making the best hay, having a tidy farm. We were hard workers. And
that's the upbringing of your mother, bringing that hard work.
Yeah.
That hard.
Well, my dad's
graft.
My dad's family, Māori family, had the farm too down the road.
Yeah.
And the European family of mine were up on the hill, the lush country. But they had all the gorse and the swamp. But they were hard workers too. A couple of them were big influences in my life. Tough men. They made me tough. They didn't shelter things from me.
Yeah.
They exposed me earlier than anybody should be to the dark side of life, I was smoking a cigar when I was 9 because they passed it around and I choked and spewed on it. And I shot a shotgun for possums. We were hunting possums and rabbits when I was about 12. And I was going to the pub when I was 13, or 12 or 13 with my uncles, a heap of them. So I was exposed to that, but it wasn't an abusive life. It was a happy life. And one of them always used to encourage me, like, never say no, boy. Never give up. And when you're faced up with somebody, remember you're always better than them. Now, this mightn't have been the right way to approach it, but I'd already had a soft part of my life with my mother's upbringing, the compassionate side of the Christianity as she tried to bring to us. And that did have a root in my life. But my Uncle Colin, in a big family of 18, He was about 5 years older than me. He was tough, rugged. He'd been watching Muhammad Ali on TV. But that's where he got it from, you know?
But Muhammad Ali had the self-belief. That's all right. I'm better than everybody else, right? I'm going to knock you over. I'm the king of the world.
And he was bringing this in through the TV, black and white, little TV in those days, to my younger uncles. There was 4 or 5 of them here between them too. And I was hanging with these guys. They used to watch Muhammad Ali and hear him, I'm the greatest. And, see him, I'm Fraser of the, he's ugly. I'm beautiful. I'm going to knock him out. And when these guys were living on this, building up, which I think wasn't a Kiwi quality.
No, because we always knocking people who are, achieving well. We like to bring them down a peg or two just to let them know.
That was amazing. We sort of didn't let ourselves get too carried away and saying that I'm going to do it. I'm going to rise up. I'll do it. I'll take the pace of it. I think I'm a great person and I can do this and win this. That's not the language that I heard in those years. It was more silence. It was all actually even littered with fear and anxiety and uncertainty about tomorrow. Whereas this confidence and boldness, I just drank it all in. As a young boy, I drank it in. I believe what he said. He'd take me down in the dark, down the road to the Urupa, which is a Māori cemetery. And he would walk through there, make me walk over the graves at night. Some of them were unmarked, and I was like, oh, what? Should we be doing this? He said, don't be scared of the dark. Make the dark scared of you. He was like, wow, So I didn't. I was drawing off his confidence, his boldness, and we'd shoot possums on the cemetery on these big poplar trees, and they'd fall on the ground.
They go all the way down from the poplar trees.
Oh, they'd fall along where blue on the graves, and grab it, boy. We'd stumble and walk over this put up with a cross or two we locked over, and out the gate again, and walk up the road in the dark. Little did I know, however you look at that was shaping something in me, Cam. That was giving me a self-confidence. He always said, we walked past some of the other cousins and in-laws and outlaws. He'd say, I won't say the name, see them, boy? You're better than them. Then we walk up there and you see these ones, you'd say the name. You're better than them. Your name's better than them. And I used to go, oh, okay. I believe them, right? I'm better than you guys.
But I'm loving hearing that, because one of my mentors, a guy who speaks really highly of you, I don't even know if you've met him, but he was brought up by a mother who used to say to him, you're say their surname, you're this, and you're better than everybody else.
Yeah.
Right? You can't be defeated. You've got...
That wasn't common common language in families at that time.
No.
And quite the opposite for a big Māori family, where, it's connected to abuse or alcohol. Where they were drinking, but there was no sexual abuse. Although they were totally against that. But they were hard workers. But there's this thing about, I think Muhammad Ali sowed a seed, particularly in my Uncle Colin. And he sowed that in me. And I drank it in, and I became that very independent. My mum used to say that about me in my younger life. She said, you were an independent person, Brian. Whereas Michael, my younger brother, next one, and then Douglas, were a lot more,
go along.
Yeah, Gentile, and sort of, they were relatable in the sense that they depended on mum. But I was independent.
But that makes the story of your conversion to Christianity that much more powerful, because I know plenty of people are independent thinkers, and I'm one of those people who's an independent thinker. If we can come to Christ through the message, then anybody can, because we're the ones who are most skeptical. We're the ones who are always questioning. We're the ones who are always going, well, hang on a second, Mum, or hang on a second, even challenging the minister. So hang on, how can you say that when this happened and that happened in the Bible, and always questioning and learning from those responses? But if we can come to Christ, then anybody can.
Yeah, well, the conversion, I think there's nothing wasted in your past. You might have gone through a rough past. I'm talking to maybe some people who have been through abusive aspects or parts of their life, but you can survive it. And when you survive it and win, then you qualify to be able to heal others. What I'm healed of, I can heal in you.
Yes.
And what I'm not healed of, I am restricted in my ability to help others. So I guess in my upbringing, having all these challenges and these, troublesome times too, and your ups and downs, that's the development of a character. And I can see now God's hand in my life, and maybe yours too, and everybody's, long before they come to an actual conversion or meeting the real Christ. He knows already what you need or your personality in your life to fulfill the call of God on my life for the future. Now, and you see, so most people know me maybe, even if it's through the media or for a friend, but for people who really know me, I can see how valuable the good parts of my past, but also the bad parts,
they're all learning opportunities.
They do. They strengthen you. They help expose to you parts of your character that you can change, and it gives you a greater a level of, I guess, humility. I think experience is a big one. You can't buy experience. You don't get experiences at school or universities. Experience comes by what you go through in life and allow yourself to learn by those experiences. So after 43 years of walking in the Christian faith, my experience now, and that coupled with that wisdom that comes by living life in various parts, where you win, where you lose, what you have as your gifts and your talents, helps you make great decisions for many people who you mentor, that I might have, say, following in our movement today. I mean, of course, God's voice is my priority, but
you've got a huge responsibility for that too. Yeah. If you're going to lead people, and we each lead people in different ways. I've got an audience that I speak to try and share the knowledge that I've gained over my life, and you're doing the same thing. But I'm going to ask you, it's probably deeply personal, but I'm going to ask you, because you mentioned that you saw Christ, yes, in your conversion, and I'm interested in hearing more about that, and there's a reason for that, which you'll hear afterwards.
Okay, well, I'll probably, Cam explains why I'm the person I really am today. Why I'm so persistent in bringing to every human I can the reality of Christ. Look, in my life, I had no reason as a young man of 21 years old, not long after my 21st, sure, I was drunk, I was drinking, but no more than anybody else around me. And most young Kiwi men, I wasn't in a situation where I was desperate. I was making great money. I had no need for religion, and I didn't see the need for that. It was a crutch to me. But when I went to that meeting, and I sat in the back with Hannah, we weren't married, living life. She was pregnant with our first child. And this preaching, that's why I preach. Speaking, teaching, sharing, conversing over a cup of coffee is not preaching. Preaching is inspired speaking where the Spirit of God speaks through that.
Yeah.
And this is what this man was doing. It had to be, I always said if I was going to be converted to religion, I had to meet him. That's exactly what happened. After this man had preached about whatever he was preaching about, but he mentioned the name Jesus Christ through it. This time, every time he mentioned his name, a heat would go deep in my belly, be a heat, and I could feel it, like it was almost unexplainable. And I knew that it was a force outside of anything that I could ever conjure up myself. It wasn't feelings, it was beyond my feelings. Now, Hannah was next to me, and I knew she was listening too, and by the end of it, I was racked inside by that name, Jesus Christ, had effect on me like it never been. I just swore his name. cussed.
Mm.
But now that name was burning in my gut regions, deep inside. And he said, anybody in this room wants to make a decision for Christ and come up to the front. And I said, oh no, I'm long hair and bushman drinking, rugby playing, 21-year-old.
Not good enough.
Well, no, I was good, all right. My thing was I'm not going to be shot, was self-consciousness.
Mm.
I didn't want to get in front of all these people, walk down there, and what are they going to do to me? But he said again, anybody, now I knew I wanted to, because something was pulling. There was that same heat in there. Now Hannah got up, and as she got up to go forward, I grabbed her wrist. Never forget this. And I said, where are you going? What she didn't know is that I was so insecure and so self-conscious. I wanted to go, but I could never make it on my own quite. I just needed a push. And I thought,
in this case.
well, in this case, she gave me a karate chop. Let me go like I was, some kind of an abuser. And I hand went down, and she says, I'm going to receive Jesus, and you can stay where you are, because we were having trouble. We were definitely in trouble by that time.
Well, you were young. You were about to have a family.
Well, I'd say I was, there was arrogance, there was insecurity, but inside of all this, I wanted to do this better than what I saw in my father and what he and his family, how they grew up. I wanted better for my future and my family. So I started walking, and I thought, no, run to the car, go out the side, go to the Mark II Zephyr's park there, and sit in there and wait. So I thought, yep, my mind made up, but I kept walking straight ahead. And there was something pulled me. I got to the front, and then I was told by these guys, they were like clapping. They thought they'd got one, long-headed. And they just pointed where Hannah went to this curtain. So went behind it. And I thought, what the hell? We sat down, and he was this big guy saying, hallelujah, praise the Lord. And I said, oh, no, yeah, get up and just walk out. But I couldn't. And he said, do you want to receive Jesus Christ? And I said, yes. And so we prayed this prayer, confessed my sin. I asked him into my life. No great big stars or bang, done it, out. Let's go. A week later, I was in my room, and I don't know, I thought I was at a crossroads. Something must have happened, but I wasn't. There was nothing about what I said. I just prayed, and then in faith that I believe. Harry, if you believe the Lord Jesus Christ, you'll be saved. That's all you need.
Mm-hmm.
So I was saved, but I needed more. And I think God knew that. Suddenly, I was just dropped on the floor in my room. I just dropped. I don't drop easy. Either
You're
a tackle.
yeah.
And I have never been knocked down in a fight. And I fell on the floor back out, and I was out. Now, I went out of my body, through my body, and a heat wave, that same heat that hit me in the back of that room, and that man was saying the name Jesus Christ, hit me again. And then I went through the ceiling and the roof. My whole body was going out like this, and I could see the brightness. The brilliance was, I can't explain the brightness of it, brighter than the sun. But I could see. And what I saw was not just that image, but it was like fire. And I was so like, wow, I could feel this power, like he could just press me and I'd pop. That's how powerful. But on the other side was love. And when I say love, the only love I knew was woman, right? Not this. This exceeded that. It was coursing through my body. It was so beautiful that it was sanitizing, cleaning me. Every self-doubt, worthlessness, everything was just getting washed. And I said, who are you? And he just said, I'm Jesus, and I'm going to use you. And I looked up, and then at that moment, just a glimpse was this little power lines. And it was only, all this, it was out of place in the picture, because I wanted to stay in this. I wanted to go with this and take me away. If that was death, I want it. But it didn't, and I saw this little wee parachute hanging down from a power line. And then I suddenly got a little bit of fear in me. And the moment I got fear, bang, I was back in my body. Hannah thought I was dead. She was around the corner, come from the kitchen, down the passageway. She'd see in the bedroom door, me slumped over. She thought I was dead. She came down. By this time, I got up. And she said, "What are you doing on the ground?" And I was embarrassed. So I said, "I just met Jesus." She said, "Well, how do you know that?" I just met him. I went out of my body, honey. You won't believe me. She said, "Well, tell me." I went through the roof outside, but I didn't get, was this bright light. And I said, "Hold on. I got to go and do something." And I ran down the passageway, through out the front door, down the long driveway. Still couldn't even see I could see the power lines coming now over the side, absolutely clear. But when I got to the letterbox in the corner, this shows you how much there, I've never seen it. There it was, a little wee parachute that your kids used to have.
A little spaceman parachute.
Yeah, and it was a little string hanging down, wrapped around. That's what I saw. And I'd never seen it before, and I knew. And I knew it was real. At that moment, nobody told me, I never read the Bible. I stopped right there. I never swore again. I decided to drop my drinking whiskey and cannonballs made up of bourbon, whiskey, rum, a whole mixture, a whole lot. I dropped smoking straight away. I dropped off the odd, joint. Everything dried up in me in that. And I haven't even gone to church. And I said to Hannah, I don't want to drink anymore. I don't want to go out anymore. I don't want to do this. I don't want to lie anymore. I'm telling you right now, I've got to serve him. And from there, our whole lives just went, woof.
There's no way to explain that when things like that happen. The reason why I asked that is I was brought up a Presbyterian. I used to go to church every Sunday with Mum. Dad would come most times. But I really didn't get what this message was. I'd studied the Bible. I'm a voracious reader of anything historical. Ask me about particular times in Roman history or the Middle Age, I was into it. But I couldn't work this thing out. But Mum had this faith, and she studied it, and she had done all of the study, and we could talk about things, and I'd talk about it from a historical perspective. I never understood it. And it wasn't until 2014, so, it's a few years back now. It's 11 years ago. So I would have been 46 at that stage. And I was in Israel. And on my way to Israel, Nicky Hager dropped his Dirty Politics book. So I was in the air for hours on end. When I got to Israel after a long trip, because I had to go via Paris and then on LL back to Jerusalem, because the flights weren't going into Tel Aviv at that time.
Ooh.
And I was literally under siege. I had hundreds of messages, mostly abusive, media chasing me. But I felt there was some sort of, okay, I'm here in Israel. I'm just going to go and do the trip that I was here to do, and I'll deal with this later. But the media just kept ringing and ringing and ringing, and the pressure was building and building and building. And on about the third day, we went to Jerusalem because we were staying in Tel Aviv. And the great thing about 2014 at that time was Hamas was in a war again with Israel. There weren't many tourists, so there was no queues. We could walk through through the old city of Jerusalem with no queues, no hustle, no bustle. We ended up going into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is, people look at pictures of the crucifixion, and we all got this picture in our head that there's this round hill and 3 crosses on it. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, where's this? And I didn't realize, even being a student of history, I didn't realize that a church had been built over the top of it, that it really wasn't a hill. It was a big rock. And there it was. Here's this big rock. And then I looked into the meaning of it, meaning of skull and Golgotha and all of that. But while I was standing there on the balcony that's straight over the top of Golgotha, and it was a Russian tour group, and they were all speaking Russian. There was nobody else around. It was just me and them. And I was about 10 meters away. They were getting down and kissing the stone and doing all that. And I was very stressed. And I heard this voice. It was a Kiwi accent. Didn't recognize the voice. And said very clearly, like speaking like I'm speaking now, "Don't worry, Cam, it'll be okay." And it shocked me. And I looked around and there was no one. There was no one around that I thought maybe it's the acoustics. Maybe it's someone down, that flight of stairs and the voice is coming up. And it wasn't. There was nobody there, right? It wasn't my voice. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't anything else. I have to put it down to the location of where I was and that God spoke to me.
Yeah.
And from that day on, I didn't care anymore about what the media said or what newspapers would write about me or what haters would send me on Twitter or Facebook. Or I didn't care. I literally didn't care anymore. And once I realized that I didn't care, I realized that I could heal myself.
Yeah.
It took me another 10 years. It took a stroke to really ram it home that, hang on, Cam, you had that experience and you kind of ignored it. Here, have this one, and lying there in the hospital, unable to move my arm or hand or my right leg, sitting there facing a life as a cripple. And I got this resolve in me and said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to get better. And I've set about ever since that time, getting myself closer to Christ, and not being afraid to talk about it. Our church has got this big sign up outside and everyone drives past it every Saturday and it says, "Come as you are." But they don't mean it. And I say this all the time to her. I said, "Yes, come as you are." But, there's people there tut-tutting because a woman's wearing a short dress. Adventists are very conservative, right? Or a gang member comes in and he's got his dirty jeans and things like that, and they're turning their nose, and turning their face. Here's someone who's come in this building. He's seen the sign that says, "Come as you are." Why are we turning them away? And I have this, and then, with Avi Yemeni coming down and you helping us out, I actually saw this, down there in Petone, at your church there, across the road from the Mongrel Mob pad, right? And Heka has this force in him. And he was sitting there and he says, people walk across the road and they drop their patch at the door and they never pick it up again. And they come and join Christ's gang. And when I saw that difference, and like, these are fearsome, so your man up boys they're tough men, but when you saw the difference that it's made, and my partner, she was involved in the Posey Parker thing, and she was frightened that day. She was scared of these men in frocks that were being violent. And her and her friend said, "No, let's go and find those man up guys. We'll be safe there." And they walked down the road and found where your guys were. And all of a sudden they felt safe again. But I'm hearing that in your story, in your upbringing, that you were brought up with that tough upbringing, converted to Christ, became a Christian, created a church, and then founded Man Up to bring tough men to the church.
Yeah, I think you don't have to lose your masculinity to as a Christian. I think your masculinity is defined and refined. Like I consider myself as a tough mind but a tender heart. You have to, and I think this was born out of Hannah and I. I've always had a passion for men. And when I went to church after I got converted, I went to a small church way back in the 1979, 1980, 81. In those days, church wasn't a big thing. It was more the parachurch organizations, Youth for Christ, Youth with a Mission, Full Gospel, Businesses, Fellowship, and all those things. But churches weren't that popular. The music was drab. They weren't great, exciting places to go to. Well, at least that's my experience And when I went to church, it was like that. It was fairly drab. The music was substandard. I was a musician. And it kind of was a lot of women there. Men weren't there. But the ladies were representing their family kind of like, and those who were probably genuine, and that they were small, 60, 80 people. So how did I come into this? And I was on fire by this time. And I think that Holy Spirit my mum got baptized in, that's what I got baptized in.
Yeah.
So now I was full of God. My mission in life had changed early. I was on a mission now to save the world and then tell everybody. I went on the streets straight outside the commercial hotel in my hometown and tell me that's a pub I used to go to, smoke cigars and think I was, a big cat.
All that in a bag of chips.
And I was 12 or 13. Now we're eating fish and chips. I was rocking with because all my uncles were the big town heavies. Any time in a pub, there'd be 7 or 8 of them. So I had all these watches, But now I was over the road with a guitar and my wife singing songs. I try to modernize songs and write my own Christian songs. I was singing across the road from them and now preaching. And they knew who I was and they knew the person I was. They'd come out there and swear and say, you should be here, over here and here. What are you doing that rubbish for? And I said, come over here and I'll pray for you. Come on. And I used to do all this and visit them and mix among them because I was a forward person then. I was strong. I played great rugby. I'd won some great awards, and I was captain of teams, so I had a quality. So I wasn't a pansy. To them, for me to be a Christian was out of place or out of sync with the way that we were working hard and picking up hay, doing the cows, bulls. I was doing all that stuff, carving, farming, and forestry, in the forestry gangs. So I was in a hard life, a hard world, but I was a gift. And people knew that. So I had qualities that they saw leadership. So when I got converted, there was a measure of respect. They'd mocked the Christianity, but they were careful how they did that with me. And I had my brothers too that started to get interest in Christianity because of my Hannah and I's passion was so fervent. I mean,
Infectious.
yeah, we were very infectious. It was contagious to the point that everybody knew about it. Don't go to Brian and Hannah's place, they'll try and
Convert you.
yeah, but beautiful. There's something about them. He's different. They all said that. I had one uncle I visited in New Plymouth on mum's side who was a drinker, another big family they were Italians because my grandmother was Italian and most of them were half Italian. I think with a father that was a different race. I can't remember his. They had a big family too. And I remember going back and we used to drink together in the day. And excuse me. And I went to visit him, he straight down with I think it was a vodka, tipped it in there and we were going to have a drinking session. And I got the glass and I pushed it aside and I said, I just don't drink anymore. Nobody told me to. I said, Trevor, I just don't drink anymore. He said, what the fuck? Looked at me, we always drink. And I said, no, I don't want to drink it. And he grabbed that and he tipped it all over my head. He wanted me to take the old bride of the reaction and maybe boom, And I just sat there and said, hey, I'm going to go now. Obviously, and he said, no, you drink with me. And I said, no, Trevor, I don't drink anymore. You've tipped that over my head. And I said, that's enough. I'm going. I'll talk to you again when I see you sometime in the future. And he just mumbled and I walked out. It was a few years later that he'd met Christ.
Mm.
And I remember talking to how he was just saying to me, now I can see what you did. And I was blind to it. I didn't know. It was the booze culture, the boys all down the club and the pub drinking, contractors, so forth. So, but he said, I see now. And lost his family, lost a lot of stuff in life, got sick, went through all that just to finally say yes to Christ, So stuff like this. And
So when did you decide that the existing church you were involved in wasn't really going to cut it for the mission that you felt that was driving you, and decided you're going to create Destiny Church?
I don't know how to put this, but I think a lot of people could understand it. I knew God had a specific call in my life, and that call was more than the usual, but I didn't know how that was going to work out. And I remember going and I served in the Apostolic Church for 13 years. Hannah and I decided I had to go to Bible college. I left school when I was 15. I had the potential intellectually. I had it there, but I just never was encouraged. And most guys and my friends were playing rugby, and they were working straight away. And when I went out, you didn't have money, and I just felt going any further to university like that. In fact, I was chosen in the school out of 5 students to go to St. Peter's College in Cambridge. Because
It's a good school.
yeah, well, in those days, it was a big thing for me to be chosen. And I had a French teacher who chose me and said, it was one out of the box, that Brian Tamaki was one of the choices out of the whole school with 3 others, that they would pay half the fees to go to St. Peter's. He believed the potential in me. So when my mum got the letter, of course, and my dad, there's no interest, they had no money. So that never happened. But later in life, I wanted to go to a very academic college, not Faith Bible College, which was in Tauranga at that time, a popular college, because it was more, the practice of going out street thing. I had no problems with that. I went to Waikato prison. I was visiting my neighbours. I spoke the gospel unashamedly, boldly. What I needed to do was to know from Genesis to Revelation. I wanted to know God's word deeper. I read that Bible. I used to take it to work with me every day. I stopped taking food and would take the scriptures and sneak it in my bag so the boys wouldn't be such a drastic shock to them. And I just devoured it. I read it. And it was like I could understand. Everything I was reading was reinterpreted through my spirit and my world. I could see what that meant and how it applied. But I wanted more. So I went to Bible college. I went to Te Bible College in Wellington. I applied. I got the full amount of money. It was all we had, Hannah and I. Hannah was pregnant with one of our children. The last one, we had 2 little wee toddlers. It just wasn't a cool time to go away to a little wee apartment and do full-time Bible training, 15 subjects.
In this den of iniquity that Wellington is.
Well, yeah, it was outside of where it was Paraparahumu.
Yeah.
It was where the big statue was. It used to be of Mary at Paraparahumu.
Yeah, I remember that on the hill, yeah.
It was behind there. And it was a very intense university level, 15 subjects. I took all the subjects, paid up the fees at the beginning, and I was as hungry as a dog. I wanted everything I could get out of God. I wanted to go through all the studies of hermeneutics, the art of preaching, homiletics, was the art of, interpretation, hermeneutics. Homiletics was preaching. Then I did the books of the Bible, the book of Hebrews, 1, 2, 3, Corinthians, 2 Corinthians. I did the pastoral books of 1 and 2 Timothy, Titus. I also did correspondence through in Brussels, where most of the correspondence for the Bible College came from. So I did all of these subjects, and I just thrived in it from all day with the lectures. And theology was my favourite, with the Dr. John Douglas, who was the theologian of the day. I became his pet in some ways, but he really I think he was very interested in the way that I devoured. Henry Thiessen's on systematic theology was the book that I read from cover to cover on the character of God, the study of God, everything about God and his nature and his attributes. And
yeah, I just feel on it. People study the Bible enough, or study history even And we've got these study groups at our church. We have church and then we go to study group. Now, I really enjoy study group. Now, I've got a guy that that leads that, and he's very diligent, researches things, and takes a bit of a different tack from the stand up the front, normal run-of-the-mill type preaching. It's a bit deeper, and I really like that.
Well,
Like we've been studying Hebrews, and that's a fascinating book.
that's the book I studied as well, Hebrews. One of my favorite books.
But all of
The book of Hebrews.
all of those letters, all those epistles are fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, like people take, and you see people take Paul out of context all the time. And you can't do that with Paul because he starts a story and meanders through it and always has the therefores and things like that. And he's referring to what he's talked to before. So if you take that bit out of context, you can't do that without including all the rest. But once you understand that and read the whole book and understand the hidden message and the historicity of it, especially Corinthians, right? Like a lot of people don't think that everything that's in the Bible happened in the Holy Land. Well, it didn't. Corinth's in Greece, you know, Ephesus is in Turkey. All of these places, a lot of places are in Turkey. This is where they happened because Paul went to where the church had grown. And so the audience was different. The message that he gave the audience was different. The core was the same, but how he couched those things, talking to Ephesians or talking to Corinthians or talking to Hebrews, he had a different message at each step of the way that was the core message, but just said in a different way. It's just amazing.
Yeah, well, you see, with this, what you're saying is a very important part of my life, and a lot of people don't realize that I qualified, I passed with incredible marks. I got 100% in 2 subjects. One was the book of Hebrews, and the other one was homiletics preaching, the art of preaching. And with all of that, I did correspondence for another 6 years. So it was university level stuff. Theology was a big one for me.
You've probably done more study than most Presbyterian or Methodist.
Oh, yeah, it was a long time. I applied myself to it because for me it was like kind of making up for lost time that I never took myself through. Yes, probably the education that I could have done and reached university, but because of this, I wanted to be a lawyer. But this is my core. This is who I was.
You're being a lawyer.
I became a big
law.
I became a big revelator. Revelation is my greatest gift. Revelation, taking that scripture in that Bible, making it come alive here and now. Being able to motivate a person who's 10, 12 years old, especially for Māori, who I really had a compassion for, to see them do well. A lot of them that were in crime and prisons, not doing too well. The reputation was bad amongst Kiwis. I wanted to lift them and to make them successful in life, productive people in society. And so that's where the Man Up ministry came out of.
You've blended your Maori identity without using it as a crutch. That's not a negative saying, but you know, there's a lot of activists these days who use their Maori background as a crutch almost. You know, but you haven't. You've taken that and you've blended it with Christianity and created a message that is resonating for some of the toughest people in this country.
Well, you're not a surprise to God when you're born. Yeah, he said, I knew you before you were born, as in Jeremiah, and I've called you. So you and I and everybody that's born, God knows your makeup. And so that's the makeup he gave me, was my Māori and my European, and my grandmother is Italian. So there's that mix.
Tamaki's a good Italian name, isn't it?
Tamaki,
Albert Cannelloni or...
But I think that goes to making the richness of it, because Māori have got a very unique talent, and that's in the bloodline. They're warriors. They're natural warriors. So I've been able to take that gift and use it in the Christian perspective of men who have been redeemed, Māori, and they've taken that particular war dance. So I've used it effectively by having the Spirit of God run through it and sanitize it and represent it. And a good example will be seen again on the 21st, Saturday, the 21st of June. June, yeah, down here in Auckland, you'll see it. It'll come out. So I've harnessed the best, after the conversion of some of the worst nightmares in society. That's what makes our job so satisfying. Getting a toko manahi, or kopu, who's a old, notorious mongrel mob leader, been in prison for over 20 years, and he gets converted and he meets me where I meet him, and he knows that God is the greatest thing in his life. So he gets his wife and his children. He's beaten all his life. All his men he's beaten in prison. He's been feared, and now he loves Jesus. He's singing gospel songs. He's up and he stands there and he gives his testimony. And he just stands there, and some of the toughest young fellows listen to him. And I've seen many like that. And I'm saying, like, this is what it's about.
I picked that up when I was talking to Heka in Wellington, right? He had a lot of tough guys around him down there, right? And you if you go back and you look at Once for Warriors, for example, which is a great film because it actually showed what gang life was about, what a lot of Maori are experiencing. And like, it shocked people, when that happened. You're seeing people like that who think that because they belong to a gang and because they can perform a haka, that they have mana. And then you show them what mana looks like with Man Up. And you can see it in them, they stand very tall. There's not even a pride in it because we all know where pride leads.
Yeah.
But there is a respect that, they were tough, but they're tougher now because they've got God on their side. And you can see it in them in the way they comport themselves. And sure, you're going to have people that fall off the wagon or whatever because we're all sinners.
Well, John Campbell makes sure he makes those known.
But you never look at the hundreds, if not thousands of people that you've say
thousands of people that have gone through the Man Up program now. I founded that about 20 years ago in its early stages. But now, where it is in Australia, it's in Nigeria, Kenya, it's in the UK, it's in America. It's growing. And it's growing very well in this country.
The whoopsies and the liberal elites would say it's toxic masculinity.
Oh, yeah, of course they do. They would. Well, if you were a man with hairy legs wearing high-heeled shoes and putting lipstick on you, you would say that stuff. But these men, it's not the masculinity that's toxic. It's a masculinity that now he knows that he's the man who must love his wife, raise his children.
Have responsibility.
And take responsibility, and work hard and be that person. Now, when you have someone like Chris Hipkins question that about the masculinity of Man Up, for a guy who doesn't know what a woman is, right? You can see how mixed up Kiwis can be. And I know there's a lot of ill feeling amongst, many middle white people. Even today, it's more pronounced again about the divide between Māori and what they see and how that they've bludged and all that sort of stuff, and they're in prisons and the way they treat their families. Yeah,
kill kids.
It's true. Yeah, killing kids, killing babies. But I want to say that it's a different type of Māori in Man Up and in Destiny Church. And when you meet these Māori, they're like them. They're like you. Just that their skin's a bit brown or they've got that race connection to Māori. Nevertheless, they got the same blood. We all pump the same blood. We have a mind, we look the same, basically skin and humans, and we all got to face God. But when you see them redeemed by that encounter with Christ, how satisfying it is to see them now come around and be able to be people who look after their children. I've seen them get their kids out of the system.
The Liberals would say, what would work better is to have wraparound treatment. They have all these slogans, right? The one thing I've seen with what I've seen about the Man Up program is there's no slogans.
No.
There's no pussyfooting around. It's very confronting. And when you see, and I've seen this, I saw it in Wellington, a very tough-looking guy breaking down in tears, realizing what a mess his life has been, and then standing up after unburdening himself of that and putting aside his patch and never wearing it again and becoming a different person almost overnight. You've got to say, we can forget all of the social workers, all the wombles and things out there. This is something that actually works. It's got proof that it works.
Well, it works so good, Cam, that government doesn't want to fund it in any shape or form. They tried by controlling it and taking Christ out of it. But it would be ruinous.
How did they try to do that?
It would be ruinous for them to put men up in the prisons, because a lot of them would lose their jobs, and a lot of the corrections is a huge amount that it costs to house these inmates. We got an answer to it. Well, how did that come about? They did come. It was Andrew Little, who was the Justice Minister at that time. He came and seen me, and he admitted, always behind closed doors, by night, that it was the most successful program for Māori men and women in families. So they wanted to kind of go into a partnership with us and help fund it so that more and more facilitators can be doing it, not just after hours when they finish long hours of work and then their own time, but actually take it up more full time. I kind of I've always juggled the thing that, it would be the ruination of a program like this to be touched in any shape or form by politics. I just knew that in my gut. But at the same time, I did see that how I could spread this better and more time for those who are carrying the extra burden after work, in their spare time. So when he came, he put that to me, and I said, well, okay, then let's put something on the table before us. So he said, I'll see you in another couple of weeks. He came back, going straight to the point. They could tell by his face and how he walked into the room. There was no go coming, but I wanted to hear.
He's a little man compared to you.
Yeah.
He would be a foot shorter than you, probably.
Yeah, most of them are. In height, they do get shocked when I walk into the room. They think, oh my gosh, he's mean, lean, and machine.
I just see Brian. That's all I see.
I was trying you there. So look, he gave this scenario. He said, look, I went and seen the bureaucrats. That's what they were. And they basically said, no way in hell are we going to finance Brian or his church. This will be good for all my knockers out there, because they don't go giving money to us like Tamaki and Waipiri Trust and all the other Māori organisations, because they know that our Christian faith undergirds us. And he said there are two conditions they won't do that. Is one, you got to take the name of Jesus Christ out of your program. And I said,
this isn't going to go particularly well.
Number two, he said, we want 65% control of the program. And he looked at me and he knew what was coming. And I said, well, number one, no, that's what makes these programs work and succeed is Jesus Christ. And that's why the governments fail, because they haven't got that. Number two, you're not touching this with your grubby, filthy hands, because anything government touches turns to SHIT. Okay. And so I think this is a right outcome that confirms to me that Man Up really succeeds because you can't control it. So thanks, but no thanks, Andrew. Goodbye. That was it.
If only they'd been brave.
Well, that's not something that I can find in a politician in this country.
Very, very few politicians are brave.
Well, if they could have come and said, you know what, Brian, you're doing a good job. We'll do it like an Elon Musk. Come alongside. Show us how to help Māori families. You've already done it for 20 years. If you do it with the Christian faith, that might be an added bonus. But I'll know they hate me. They hate me because
I really think they
because
do
of
hate
Christ.
you.
Because of Christian faith.
Yes.
If I was the rugby player of the past, had made the All Blacks, ex-league, started a rock band, they would be all over me, right? As long as you keep the Christian thing out of it.
Shh, be quiet about that. Yeah.
This way.
But you won't be quiet about that.
No.
Because it's what's made you.
Well, I'm probably, I might as well blow a trumpet about
If you don't blow your own trumpet, nobody else will.
As the Apostle Paul said, if I'm going to boast, I'll boast in the Lord. But, I'd probably be the loudest voice in this country for the Christian faith. I'm still hammering at this. I believe on that Saturday, the 21st of June, that the government must make a national declaration and returning Christ back to our country, or Christianity
You know they will.
was our official religion. Of course I know they won't.
Like Christopher Luxon says he's a Christian,
Oh,
but anytime he's asked about his church or asked about his faith, he minimizes it. And that's why I have very little time.
but
for it.
Ezekiel, God showed me it's very reading that. This is a while ago. He said, I've made you a watchman. That's in Ezekiel 3:16. I've made you a watchman. I was reading this. I know you're talking to me. Speak. Therefore you to watch over your nation and the nations of the earth. He said, you're to speak all that I tell you to speak to them. And if they refuse it, still speak it to them. If they accept it, still speak it to them. But if you don't speak it to them, then their blood is on your hands. And I said, oh, wish I knew. So now, some people might understand this, a lot won't, but that's why I do what I do. It's not a responsibility, it's a duty.
Well, you've been given a mission to speak.
Regardless of how you take it,
I don't understand this derision or mocking. I do on a higher level, in that Christians need to be brought down all the time. There's this need in liberal democracies, in the West in particular, to prostrate themselves before other religions. I mean, a case in point, and everyone was saying, oh, well, it's okay because Christopher Luxon was visiting the temple and he had to wear that gear and go to the... You wouldn't see Donald Trump getting down on his hands and knees in another country. And I don't know why Western politicians, we saw it with Jacinda Ardern, we saw it with Trudeau, we see it with Luxon, they play dress-ups and it's performative and they don't mean it. Why don't they just be true to themselves? And my grandmother told me that, she used to bash it into us, not literally, but she would bash it into us. To thine own self be true, she would say over and over again.
But what would one think? Like in Joshua 24, God said very clearly to him, he said, you shall have no other gods before me. And if you want to ruffle my feathers, this is my words, but the same as his, then you have foreign gods amongst you. You will not have foreign gods amongst you or any other gods. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, and visiting iniquity of the fathers and the sins to the third and fourth generation. And he comes again. If there's one pet hate that God of all this universe has, is when you play with false religions and gods. Now, I take that to heart very deeply.
It's all in Ezekiel if you read all of that. And there's a lot of smiting going on.
There's a lot of killing. God's killing people. So countries that involve themselves in this, and most people listening to this would think, so what about, Hinduism and Islam and, no religion and atheism and, pantheism and many gods? Who cares, Brian? Well, who cares? God. Now, if you're interested in this little part, that's why we're suffering in this world today. The punishment on Great Britain, a country that is supposed to be the head, the crown, the king is responsible, taking an oath to defend the Christian faith. They've done nothing of that. And a long time ago, not you, but New Zealanders, you abandoned our faith. You lost it. You pushed it aside. You chased money, mammon. You went after other religions. And worst of all, you made yourself your own God, calling no religion now, in the sense, this is the fastest growing one amongst middle-class Kiwis. What the hell? You think you're going to come here and know that God gave us the best years of our life in the 60s, second richest country in the world, 1% unemployment. We had great families, no threats. We had all the resources. everything was going our way when 90% of us just believed Christ. But as we gradually threw away him, and you started to have atheism, an agnostic like Jacinda, and all took on the Indian and started to be all friendly with Islam, you offended God. And you offend God,
He smites you.
that's right, you curse your own country. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord Jesus Christ. But cursed is the nation who has idols and other gods. Simple as that. So
I think it's even worse than that, Brian. I think that we've got this cult of individualism, that if it feels right, it is right.
Yeah.
That's why you've got, kids saying that they're cats, and boys thinking they're girls, and men competing in women's sports. I mean, they're absolutely shit in their chosen sport as a male. So, I'll put on some woman face, pretend to be a woman, I'll go and compete, and then I can call myself a winner. We all know it's fake. We all know they didn't actually beat the best people that they could. They were average at best when they were competing as men, and then they decided to compete against women.
Yeah.
And that is the destruction of our society, the destruction of the family, destruction of free choice. I mean, that's the greatest gift that God ever gave us. Right in the first book in the Bible, he gave us free choice. And he said, there's only one thing, right? Don't eat that.
Don't touch my pizza.
Right?
Yeah.
But he didn't put a fence around it. He didn't put some brambles around it. He didn't put it in the bottom of a cliff to make it hard to get at. He gave us free choice. And we stupidly made the choice to partake in that. And then we've had misery ever since, until the arrival of Jesus Christ said, well, that didn't work.
It's good, kid.
Yeah, that didn't work, but you've still got free choice. And here's the choice you make. You make the choice that Jesus Christ is your savior and that your sins are forgiven. You make that choice. And if you make that choice, then I'll look after you.
Well,
and that's all you have to do.
Yeah.
Make a choice.
Is this a country when you are scrambled or confused about who your God is? Who's the God of this country? People don't realize and join the dots properly together that when we believed and actually knew that Christianity fundamentally was our national religion, there's no doubt about it. The missionaries that came were Christian. They weren't Baha'i, Buddhist, Islam, or anything like that. They were Christian. And that was the bedrock of our democracy, underpinned by Christian values and ethics. They are still the best.
It was Christian missionaries that gave Maori their language in a written form.
Exactly. They will interpret it. They negotiated the deal. But this is what I want to say, Cam. And it gave us basically, in the Western so-called historically Christian countries, we had the best deal if you talked about prosperity, health, wealth, and family life as compared to other religions in Eastern countries or anywhere else in the world. What the religion they were practicing, it wasn't giving them the life and the obvious blessing and favor that Christianity was giving countries. That's irrefutable evidence. But the moment we started to, people started to abandon it for whatever reason. But once we slid back in that, it was like you left a hole, a void. And you ask any father, if a farmer who digs a hole in the ground to put a strainer post in to take the strain of all the fence line, he's got to dig that hole. That's what holds it. And it's made for one thing, that strainer post to go in there, and that will hold the whole fence line with the strength. But if he doesn't put that restrainer post in, leaves it on the ground, goes home and forgets about it, nature has this law.
Yeah, it abhors a vacuum.
It abhors a vacuum, and it has to fill it. It'll get filled with water, dirt, rubbish, something else. You leave this country void of Christianity, which you did, and what you thought was that religion didn't really matter to the economy or to my children's lives. That's just didn't add up. So you abandoned it. You threw Jesus Christ's name out of parliamentary play. You took the Bible out of schools. You made Christianity something that was to be almost mocked and hated. So you left a vacuum. And the vacuum, or that void, is what Islam needed. They needed that void to come with the absence of our protection Christianity. They poured into Christian countries.
And they're proselytizing.
Yeah.
Right? They're out there gaining new members, either by force or by persuasiveness. They're doing it. And
well, the religion they
had about faith is you have to fight for it.
The religion they had wrecked their countries. It's proof that Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, whatever religion you like, go and visit their countries and their history, they're wrecked. They do not produce famine, wrecked, ravaged, they are in civil war. They don't show the blessing. It's oppressed. It's cursed. Christianity, for whatever you say about it, look at the countries historically where Christians, they were doing well. They prospered. They thrived. That's irrefutable evidence. So what we did stupidly from Europe ahead, and for the Commonwealth countries and all of those that were Christian countries, when they threw the faith away, we downsized it, belittled it, mocked it, and exchanged it for arrogance, wine, beer, money, in your pursuit of ideology. Yeah, and all that we've got. Well, that's what pulls in. Well, we saw these Eastern religions came into these Christian countries knowing, how did you get all of these beautiful hospitals? How did you have great education? How did you have the beautiful clothing? How did you have nice homes and nice food? Whereas the gods we worship ravished our countries. The God that you even half worshipped gave you plenty and prosperity. But the moment you took it away, look what's happened. Look what we've got. How's that feeling now that you're invaded? They're raping, they're robbing, and they are destroying your country, not by bombs and guns and bullets, but the invasion of Islamic radical religion. That's what's killing our Western, historically Christian countries. That.
We've got politicians that stand up in Parliament and say they're proud to be a socialist.
Ah,
How many times have you seen a politician stand up and say, I'm proud to be a Christian? I can't name one, and I've been involved in politics for 40 years.
I reckon cleared the way. If I had 100 days in there, I could turn the country around just by common sense and making legislative moves that would bring immediate change to the country's health, wealth, and well-being. Easy.
Sounds like you're going back into politics, Brian.
I think that I should have. I only go there because it's so frustrating. Desperation.
See, I don't think.
My job's higher than a politician.
See, politicians mostly are sociopaths. Occasionally we get a psychopath. They're extreme narcissists, right? And people might say, oh, well, Brian Tamaki's a narcissist. Well, we're all a bit narcissistic, right? But I don't believe that a strong, solid Christian can enter into the world of politics and remain the same, because politics requires compromise on certain things. And
well, fundamentally,
like I'm not willing to compromise my faith to be a politician.
This is it, the compromise. And this is what, I've heard Winston say, and every other politician say as well, Lux, and they've all done it. Because their value system is not based on what I would say is stable ground like Christianity, it's moving ground.
It's a moving feast.
And compromise is what they live by to survive in politics. Unfortunately, it gives us all the wrong things. Strong, common sense, but good leadership makes courageous decisions in the face of the threat of even losing your job, criticism, or, initially taking the flack from the media and other people who have yet to give it a chance to breathe and get up on its feet. That doesn't exist in our political system. That's the type of leaders you need.
So people will listen to this and they'll say, oh, there's Brian Tamaki again, courting controversy.
Well, why don't you look at my history?
Well,
not the history of that, but what I've done with people's lives.
Yeah.
What I've raised as a movement from ground zero a church that now is known globally. I've changed lives for 40 years. I got a 5-generational family that are successful and beautiful. So when you go by fruit or somebody's words, my marriage has been, well, it's over 43 years.
Yeah.
All I see in there is people who haven't had families, don't have good marriages, have had little experience in changing people's lives, and don't have a darn blimmin' clue how to make a common sense decision about a man with hairy legs and tits up there and a blimmin' cock down there, and thinks that that's okay to allow to continue on in our country trying to target our kids. And these politicians can't make a decision to say, no, 2 genders, and I'm going to stop that and ban all pride parades, ban the rainbow flag, and ban it from all our schools. That's what I would do straight away.
Again, people will say that's controversial, but you're being true to yourself, though.
It's actually common sense for a start.
Well, I know that, and you know that. We know that there are men and there are women. There is nothing else. That's what
I would cut government in half. 122 MPs who just gave themselves a pay rise.
They're not the problem, though. Right?
Well,
the MPs are not the problem. The bureaucracy, that's the problem.
But if you've got to start somewhere, you've got to start on the MP. That's bloated, Cam. 122. Most of them are unemployed. They're getting paid.
Unemployable.
Yeah, that's right. They're getting paid. They're sitting in there. Only 3 or 4 people are making decisions for the country. You cut it in half, get rid of it. That's a nuisance. And I think you can start to deal with the bureaucracy. That swamp is what we need to drain.
Well, we keep hoping for a big earthquake in Wellington, don't we? Clean it out.
I reckon if people just did something radical in 2026, like yourself, let's all not vote for anything that's in there and vote for the people.
But we could do a small step for those who can't reach that. I always believe in giving people achievable goals. So what I would say is stop voting red or blue.
Yeah.
Stop voting red or blue or green. Right? Do not vote for either of the 2 big parties because voting encourages them to keep on doing what they're doing, which is managing the decline of New Zealand. And one makes that decline accelerate, and the other one manages to decline somewhat better, but it's a decline nonetheless. That's good. Stop voting for red or blue or green. Yeah, right? They're nuts. Do not vote for any party that has a racist core in it. And Te Pāti Maori or the Maori Party, the Maori Party, when it was led by Tariana Turia and Peter Sharples, had mana. They had respect. The clowns that are there now with their painted faces.
I think New Zealand First could be a party that we could use. They'd have to be able to be big enough, Shane Jones and Winston, to say, let's get some of the people around the country that have got common sense, great evidence of fruit, of leadership, get them together to talk about how we can change this country for the better of all Kiwis.
See, we've seen in the last week, Luxon and the National Party selling us out to the great global immigration scam that if we get all of these hardworking immigrants to New Zealand, and they can bring their, and now they're saying you can bring your parents and everything. Good Lord, do we need more Uber drivers?
I said it before we put Maternal in. Luxon is not what you think he is.
No, I agree.
I said he's up to his eyeballs in the rainbows. Yeah. Well, rainbow stuff. He's a globalist. He's going to lead our country the same way that Labour did.
But it was all there in front of us, right? Yeah. Christopher Luxon led Air New Zealand down the wokest path you've ever seen. Why would he change?
Yeah.
He's got no reason to. He thinks that works. He became the CEO of Air New Zealand and was woke as all hell.
We should have some fun in 2026.
Well, I intend to have fun. I always have fun. That's what I believe. I believe we need to bring fun back into politics. I also believe in bringing common sense. I was involved in the National Party for many, many years. I mean, my father was a president of the National Party, and I was brought up over 30 years to dislike particular groups of people simply because they weren't our team. And I've learned in the last 10 years or so that that's not conducive to good policy. That's not conducive to making New Zealand a better place. That not all ideas are bad ideas just because the other team came up with them. And part of that too was a realization that everything I knew about Winston Peters came from National Party people who didn't know Winston Peters. And when you sit down across a table like this with Brian Tamaki or with Winston Peters or anybody, you get to see a different person because, we've been talking an hour and a half now, right?
Oh, my gosh.
Easily, right? And it's just flowed as a natural conversation.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that viewers will understand the Brian Tamaki that I see when we sit down and have a coffee at your church.
What's wrong with putting everyday hardworking Kiwi families first? That's the trouble with mass immigration and what this is doing.
With public policy as well, because when you say putting families first, Kiwi families first, we've got school programs that are introduced that take away parental responsibility, whether it's sex education or even feeding their children.
Yeah, well, this is right.
And we're told that, well, if we don't feed the kiddies, who will? And my answer to that is, well, who fed them during the lockdown? So who feeds them in the school holidays?
Who feeds them any time?
Yeah.
It's parents' responsibility. But I can't believe some of the wacky legislation and the thinking that we have in this parliament, and it's been quite rife over the decades. And I think that if there's ever a time that New Zealand is going to make a move to do something totally and radically, and not radical for radical's sake, but it requires radical response to a radical problem we have right now. And if we don't do it in 2026, then we're going to lose New Zealand.
The problem that I see rests in the education system. We are not teaching boys to be men, and we're not teaching girls to be women.
Well, who's a man that's teaching men how to be men?
Well, they usually got man buns and whoopsie ideas.
Brian Tamaki. He's proven that. No, the school's asking, but you put my name there, you criticize me. So when you criticize me about raising men from being, society's worst nightmares.
But you're addressing it at the wrong end, Man, if you could have man up in school.
Take the cost of one of my guys who's been taken from the prison system for over 20 years.
That's $100,000 a year.
And the crime, right? And the battering on his wife. And then the criminal things are coming from his children. Add that one guy. This is the one guy I'm talking about.
Millions of dollars.
Not the tens of thousands of help. And now turned around in his life, got his kids out of the system, his wife's back in there. They're now productive contributors. He actually works at work and they are now happy. What price do you put on that?
Well, we know what the price of the prison is. 20 years in prison, $2 million.
Right. So what does Mark Mitchell and Luxon do as comparison to Brian Tamaki?
Well, what they're doing is they're building ambulances at the bottom of the...
Well, he's building a big new prison. And Mark says, I'm going to teach them a lesson. I'm going to lock them all up. Yeah, I understand they're locking them all up. But if you're going to keep doing that, that's not answers. You're not dealing with the situation where these people can change. They need help. They don't need the type of help that you're giving them.
They need intervention and intercession.
Well, if you put them in prison and lock them up all together, what are they going to do? That every person that goes in there, there's young men, these guys are recruiting. Prisons are recruiting grounds for the old gangs already in there. So the taxpayer, you and I, are paying them to do a better job. They recruited the young ones before they get out. They go into the gang. So it's senseless. Anyway,
we come back to mass immigration again. We don't have enough jobs for Kiwis. And all of a sudden we're saying to people who have already come here that wanted to leave the country they were in, moved for a better life, that they can now bring their parents here who haven't contributed to society.
What I'd do is shut the border tomorrow if I was in that position to do it. I'd shut the border tomorrow. Close it. Shut the border. No more. Look what he's done now with the recent bring your grandmother, your great-grandmother, and your mother and father who are all old and sick. Can't contribute, only to go into the health system and the burden of what they're doing. So close the border right now no more immigration until we fix up our backyard. Everything's pressured. Hospital is in crisis mode. We know that. Education schools are overloaded. Everywhere you look, there's an Indian. Indians own our businesses now. Indians are buying franchises. They're buying companies and they're employing their own. And because we've got no borders, trucking companies they've brought now down the South Island and right to the North Island, they're bringing out truck drivers from India who can't even speak English. And in schools, they're having trouble with our kids understanding Indian teachers. You go to a hospital and it's full of Indians in the waiting room. You go into the hospital finally after 3 or 4 weeks and you've got an Indian nurse. There's an Indian doctor waiting to cut you open. There's no money. But I'm putting an example there because
If you weren't married, they'd say you were racist.
well, Kiwis, yeah, they used to say that to me when I first brought this up 10 years ago. And now they're saying, oh, gee, there's a lot of Indians around, isn't there? It's like they suddenly wake up when it's all over top of them, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
and they're building mosques, temples, and shrines faster than houses for Kiwi families.
So there's a secondary school that closed down during COVID out in West Auckland,
Mm.
and that's just been bought by the Muslim community to create a Muslim secondary school. Wouldn't it have been better to have a Christian school definition by that?
This is probably giving and funding that to a big
Oh,
bulk.
we will be the
It's that part.
Yeah.
Well, down at the new, the whole new development of Drury down there.
Yeah.
A huge 10 to 15 acres has been dedicated to a big Indian temple with a statue that goes through the clouds. I'm going to go down there and say, if you don't stop this, the council, I'm going to have to shut it down with man up again. And people don't like that. They call us bullies. But these governments or these politicians are hopeless. They are letting our country go to the dogs, and our best skilled young people are bailing out of this country and are giving their gifts to Australia and to other countries around the world.
Let's touch a little bit. Let's change the topic a bit because you're vehement about that. When we know what you feel about.
Hey, I can rip this mic and go hit the head of Luxon, Peters, and Seymour.
If you look at the leadership that we've had of this country, we had Helen Clark, a globalist. We had after that John Key, then Bill English for a short time, and then Jacinda Ardern.
Those two knighted each other. It's about that. Anyway, yeah. So
people say to me, we need to, if we don't watch out, we'll end up a dictatorship. And I've been hearing that in politics for decades. And I always say to them, yeah, it doesn't work like that in New Zealand. We do eventually vote them out, but the harm that they do is immeasurable. We've now got Jacinda Ardern who's running around the world telling lies about how compassionate she was. She was on Oprah saying that, that a government that resorts to using fear is no government at all.
she believes she is your savior.
But that's right. The words that she uses are stolen from her Mormon upbringing to justify the excesses. And the foreign media lap this up. But she's despised in this country because of the totalitarian exercises. This is the demonization of people in society simply because they chose not to take a medication. Something that's protected in the Bill of Rights, or which the courts ignored. Right? They ignored freedom of association. They ignored freedom of speech. They ignored freedom of religion. And they prosecuted people who stood up for all of that, including you.
How can people not think that you, me, this guy over here, that lady there, are not worthy to actually be voted in as Prime Minister?
Well, that's the tragedy.
Overnight, you've got more common sense, Cam. You'd have more brain than all the ones these people think are the savior.
But that's the thing, right? Back in the 60s, in New Zealand, the pervading view was Jack was as good as his master, right? You could get an ordinary accountant who served in World War II become the Prime Minister. You could get a wharfie could join the Labour Party and become the Prime Minister. Now we've got these career politicians. What real job has Chris Hipkins ever had?
University.
Right? What job has Chris Bishop ever had?
This is what I'm talking about.
These
What are they
career politicians who achieved nothing.
I ask people, what are these people? What have they built? There's nothing. What have you done in life? Oh, been overseas and done this.
And even Christopher Luxon, what has he actually built?
Been overseas.
He managed other people's companies.
Exactly. Been in the office. I mean, we got a habit of putting all the wrong people in there. I despise the list system. That means you can have any old junkyard back door sort of.
Well, mostly they're stupid.
Put their name on there, some frustrated housewife, some wonky guy who's got some ideology from space to put his name on there, and they go in the Greens or Labour. I mean,
but National's not any better.
Right, you say it's a list system.
There's some electorates that you could put a donkey in there with a blue rosette and it'd get elected.
Yeah, it's the colour.
Right? And if they said, well, how's the vote on that? You'd hear half of them braying like donkeys, because they're just doing what the party tells them. There's no individual freedom.
They're voting for the colour. Yeah, well, okay, there it is, Cam. So
I haven't touched on John Campbell yet. John Campbell's been attacking you.
Look, they're hungry.
Yeah, it's all right. We got time for lunch.
John Campbell's only one of, I've probably had so many.
But he's so oily. He sits there and sanctimoniously, tut-tuts about, one or two bad eggs that every organisation has.
His facts are not right. It's like his facts are wrong. What his statements are not right. Some of them are on the basis of, trumped up in their lying.
They're just trying to tear you down, aren't they, Brian?
Yeah, well, you can't do that. You can have a go, but it won't happen. There's plenty of, worse dogs than them have had a go.
Do you think it's a hit piece, or do you just think it's John Campbell being John Campbell?
Oh, it's a hit piece because they were definitely, the whole country that had the woke or the stupid spirit in them reacted to my team doing the haka on Ponsonby Road, stopping the big pride parade with the flags and all the men with little skirts on, and the police force were marching with them. So was the defence force.
And the politicians.
And the politicians were marching, waving flags. This was a pure perversion show down the main street of New Zealand, being, supported and funded by taxpayers through the councils and all this sort of stuff. And you have some guys, young men, who are clean, by the way, 18 or 19-year-olds, who've decided to make a abstinence oath when they're kids to not have sex before marriage, to not have alcohol or drugs, their own choice. Most of those men had that spirit on them.
It's a series of choices, just like God gave us a choice.
Yeah, clean men who did this. There was they paralyzed the whole show. And boy, did some people get angry. They were angry with them. They were angry with me because they were attached to Destiny Church, of course, and Man Up. While 60 to 70 million people globally said, wow, I wish I could have those guys in our country. How did they stop that whole parade? Look at that. They paralyzed it. See, even people overseas saw it. My own country went after us and criticized us. They mocked us, went past mocking. There was vile hate to dox people that were in my church standing on the sidelines, just being there. They're attacking their employers to get them fired. They called us violent. We weren't violent. The Prime Minister said I went too far by saying to my guys to go to the library where an R18 adult entertainer had some little kids in a room.
Here's a question for you. If reading stories while you're dressed as a woman is so important, why do they want to always only talk to kids?
Target kids.
Why don't they go into restrooms and talk to old people who are lonely?
Because they love that. Because they're trying to tell the public that can't see it and politicians that we want to sexually violate young children, which I think is a criminal offence.
Oh, it's not just sexual violation, it's child abuse and giving them drugs to stop puberty and giving them surgeries.
Yeah,
and
it's all based, this whole movement's based on sexual deviancy. What's the heart of it? It's sexual. It's not about business. It's not a company it's about sexual stuff. And you mean to say that can, bewitch all our politicians and councils and half of my fellow colleagues in Christian churches and the public of New Zealand are all bewitched by this group? And that DEI gets into our biggest companies, into our police force, into our judicial system?
Well, there's an underpinning lack of respect, isn't there?
Well, no, it shows me what the hell's wrong with this country when common sense is replaced by stupidity.
But you had one of your parishioners, for want of a better term, one of your congregation make headlines down in Nelson recently. Walked in and there was an artist who had the New Zealand flag on the floor saying, well, she went walk on me, and she went in, picked that up and hung flag off the ground. It was disrespectful letting the flag touch the ground anyway.
Yeah. She did it 3 times.
She did it 3 times, didn't say anything, just went and picked it up and put it over. That was powerful.
That's the spirit of our movement. For ordinary people to suddenly change their whole focus of life and to care about what things that matter, like family, like our country, like things that...
Like our flag.
Flags that our forebears died for in the First, Second World War.
Imagine if there had been a pride flag on the floor that people could walk over. I mean, they do that anyway with pedestrian crossings, don't they?
Wait for the 21st of June, and you're going to see something they've never been seen before in this country.
To wrap this up, if I asked you, how would Brian Tamaki like to be remembered? What would you say to that?
I think it's already developing. He definitely stood for what he believed, and he stood for our country in times that really mattered. I cared enough to put my life out there and my family, my future, to help others' future family in their lives. Now, I want to be known as somebody that had the courage to do things, to stand up to the bully, the bad legislation, or when things weren't right. Stand up for the right things. Yeah.
Well, those are admirable goals. And from where I'm looking at it from, the things that you've achieved with Man Up, with your church, you've done an amazing job for Kiwis. And I just don't think that the media have given you a fair go. They haven't bothered to sit down and understand what drives Brian Tamaki. They sort of think, that you're creating this cult. I don't see that.
I think a cult is something that is very hard to get inside of, isn't it? And they're very obscure, hidden, secret. There's nothing secret and hidden about Destiny Church that you should say it's a cult. Cults are closed. I don't know another church that's so open publicly as Destiny Church.
Well, I mean, when I called you and said, could you help out? It was sure, Cam. We hadn't spoken that much before that. It was mostly as well. Yeah. But I think the public perception of you is different from what the real Brian Tamaki is. And
well, I can't help what the media writes. Most of the time it's not correct. But you know what? I'm not moved, or I don't work with people's opinions about me. My opinion of me matters most, and what God thinks of me. So I guess I have that type of bounce back resilience that you can say what you want. John Campbell can do a hit series on me. They've been done in the past.
But you'll still be ministering.
I still carry on. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I've said that to about 12 prime ministers. I'll be still in my job. You will lose yours.
That's exactly what I've said to prime ministers. I had Lisa Owen interviewing me in 2014. She said, you embarrassed the prime minister. I said, no, that's his responsibility for that. He can be embarrassed. said, but he's the Prime Minister. I said, and one day he won't be. That's right, I'll still be doing what I'm doing.
Well, I told Helen Clark that in no uncertain terms at the Enough is Enough march.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I let her know that opening this door was going to open a can of demonic worms in this nation later on, and I was right. And the other thing I said to her, if you could have the foresight and insight, you should put me in charge immediately of your family policies, and I'll make family policies for you that will succeed and work. Apparently she laughed her head off up in the room there, and because Javan Galter is my friend, he was up there, and the little Jacinda Ardern was there. And they were all looking down and laughing, and then she seriously stopped and said, that man is a danger to our future. Because I wanted to help families succeed.
You know, Helen Clark is a bitter old bag, and you can see that her lack of faith in anything,
She's the mother of
consumes her. Yeah. Well, Brian, thank you so much for sitting down again for the podcast, and I'll hope to have you back in the future. We can talk about other successes.
It's been not a couple of days.
No, not a couple of days. It's been great. Thank you very much.
It's okay. Thank you.
From the heart of the land with a story to tell. Cam's got the insights that ring like a bell. Polarizing points of view, he's taking a stand. With every word spoken, we're all in his hands. Politics dirty, yeah, he's seen it all. With echoes of truth, he answers the call. In New Zealand's light or in shadows.